Welcome to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo, Dr. Shirley and medium Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world. This is Both Sides Now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Both Sides Now. I'm Dr. Shirley.
And I am spiritual medium Kelly White, and we're here with John Williams.
Hello, ladies.
Hi, John. How are you today?
Pretty good. Making the best of this new Monday. How are you guys feeling? You feeling the effects of Mercury retrograde in the shadow?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or should we go there, Shirley?
Well, I know you, Shirley, because you've been trying to get the internet in the office fixed. That's a challenge, right?
Yeah, a huge challenge, and it's not fixed yet.
And
so
I hear that
we will hope for the best.
T-Mobile went down today, John, something like that.
Sure did. There's a lot of network outages. And like you said, Cal, we're just in the shadow. So this is the preview, folks, right before the movie. So buckle in.
Buckle in. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to talk about that.
Deep breathing.
Deep breathing.
Yeah.
Well,
But we do have an awesome subject today, and that's going to be life between lives with our
Yeah.
awesome guest that we're bringing back, Linda Gabriel. So that's coming up very soon.
Yeah,
But we're going
it's
to
great.
start off with the astrology update and our wonderful Cal.
let's start off with this. So Saturday night, Mars was conjuncting Neptune. Mars conjunct Neptune. So what does that mean exactly? So Mars is the planet of war, energy, fierceness, doesn't back down, activity. Did I mention war? It's also the planet of food. So when it
Oh,
conjuncts a planet, when it conjuncts means to get really close to, it conjuncts Neptune this past Saturday. So Neptune is the dreamy planet. Neptune likes to take drugs and alcohol, and Neptune likes to just kind of tune out, you know. So Mars doesn't allow that to happen. So what could this mean? Think.
well, hold on.
Let's
You
see.
said war and drugs and alcohol.
Yes,
I'd say
on Saturday night.
chaos.
Chaos. I'd say family drama. I would say family drama. So I want to know from everybody out there who had family drama. I did. I just want to know who else had family drama. And one of the things that I really want to talk to our guests about is families that fight, siblings that just fight to the death. Does in between lives are they on the other side like I'm gonna get you, motherfucker? I mean, I just want to know.
Like what happened before?
Yeah, like
In
no,
between
no,
the-
in
well-
between the lives on the other side. I just want to know, is this one going after this one? All I know is that I have had my fill of family drama, and that was my day. That was my anniversary too, watching family stuff. It's unbelievable. So I just had to
These
say
are the
that.
times when I thank God for an Asperger's dad.
Oh, you're very lucky. You're very lucky. Yeah.
It was not a peep coming from him.
Oh my God, just siblings who I don't even little. I'm 2,000 miles away from them, you know, but it's just hysterical to me actually to look back. But that was Saturday night. And the
Now,
energy
does the energy persist?
yes,
when it
and
happens?
it's going to last for a few days. And yesterday was a very intense day too. Sunday was a very intense day. It was my day off, and I had more calls about suicidal ideation yesterday, and that was a big one. So that I think also comes from that Mars conjunct Neptune position. But on the 18th, what day is the 18th, John? Is that I always ask John. Thursday.
In 3 days.
Mercury goes retrograde. Now, let me just talk about that for a minute. I know we've always covered Mercury and retrograde, and normally we just go, yeah, it's, you know, things to look, have a lot of patience, and retrograde means to go, well, planets don't go backwards, but they slow down. So when Mercury slows down, the fastest moving planet, chaos can also occur. But this one, and I'm going to view this in two different ways. I view it in Vedic astrology, which is based on the moon, and that planets move. And that's really on emotions. But I also base this same exact Mercury retrograde in Western, which is the sun, which is who we are. And those planets are stable. They don't move. So it's two different forms of doing astrology, but it hits on this Mercury retrograde. So I'm going to talk about it in both ways. Mercury goes retrograde on the 18th. Okay. And it goes the 18th in Gemini. I know everybody else is going to say it's Cancer, but it actually starts out in Gemini. Gemini rules communication. And so I think we're going to have a lot of trouble. It's also in air, it's rules air. So we're going to talk about hurricanes, earthquakes, communication, internet trouble, phone trouble. It already began. We're in the shadow of it right now. So it's already begun. And I
Mm.
think this one is going to be very intense because we have so many planets that are already that are also retrograde. Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. It's a very deep time for introspection. And then in Mercury retrograde, it's going to go into Cancer, which is going to affect the home. It's going to affect healing. It's going to affect the way the family dynamic.
Mm.
And at the same time, it actually squares Chiron, and Chiron is the wounded healer. So this is going to be a good time for healing, alternative healings. Shamanism is a big one here, and working on family wounds. So when I was talking about a family wound drama on Saturday night, that'll probably be going through for some period of time now.
Mm.
Let's just clean these things up, shall we? So that is the first. So, and Mercury retrograde means to re-examine, redo, revisit, realign with who you are. And I would say, really pack with you this time your patience. I did a live event with James last week on all the astrology events for the rest of the year. And it was a really, I think, John, what was it, like 2 hours or something of really intense delving into. And the questions that I kept getting were, is it okay to travel during this period of time? And it's always, I mean, this is how I would answer it. I would not be traveling during this time. I think you have to have a lot of patience with you when you go anywhere during this period of time. And this goes until July 12th.
Mm.
So, the second thing that I really want to talk about, and then we'll get into our great guest here, is on June 21st, we have a solar eclipse. It's the most powerful solar eclipse of the year. What's really important about this is that it is at 0 degrees Cancer. Very, very powerful degree. And it's also on the solstice. I'm sorry, it's on the summer solstice, and it's also Father's Day. Think about all that on this solar eclipse. So it will absolutely have something to do with the male, with the father, with family, with a lot of intensity, I would say. And this eclipse also squares Mars, the planet of war. Just saying. And it quincunx Saturn, and that means stuck between a rock and a hard place or the finger of God. So this is going to be a very intense period of time that we're in. And after that, there are all kinds of other aspects that are going to happen in June. But as I've been saying, June is a very powerful, powerful time. So we're going to have a lot of change here. And with that, Cheryl.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I believe I'm rather speechless. So I guess it's put on your seatbelts
And don't take them off.
until June is over at the very least.
No. This goes way past June. This is just how you're going to feel it. The energies are going to start coming out, and then it lasts for months, really, where you're going to feel the effects of this.
Mm.
The degree that this eclipse, this June 21st eclipse, the
Mhm.
same degree at 0 degrees Cancer, was the exact same eclipse on June 21st, the same everything, same degree, same day as in 2001.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
the next eclipse after this is July 5th. That's in Capricorn. That July 5th is also at the exact same degree. I think it's 14 degrees on July 5th as it was on July 5th, 2001. What am I saying? Well, 2001 was pretty powerful, intense, right? A lot of change. This is what I'm saying. I mean, there are so many other activating situations that are going to come up this month that last for many months. So, is
it's
anything positive coming up now? Yes, your soul's going to grow. Yes,
thank you, Jessica, for asking that question because
I
yeah,
know.
I mean, I guess that's what it's all
We
about,
all wanted to
is
be here
to
during
get
this time of
shaken
great
up
change.
in
Yep,
order to change. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Arlene, that's your birth date? Wow.
Father's Day and her
Definitely
birthday.
celebrate. I would say that your life would have great change. Great change to be born on that date. I would look back at 2001 and how your life changed then. That's what I would do.
Tracy, any Manilow song works any time of any day of the year. But yes, he has a song that's not new, but it's repopularized now, When the Good Times Come Again. So thank you, Tracy, for bringing that up. I don't know if anyone saw my Facebook page, but my mask has Barry Manilow's face on it. So I keep him very, very close every day. Anyways, let's introduce our wonderful, wonderful guest, because she's going to really help us figure this out a little bit as well. She is a certified clinical hypnotherapist since 1992. Linda became a certified Life Between Lives hypnotherapist in 2001, trained by Journey of Souls author Michael Newton. And I've had sessions with her. She's amazing. She has been an assistant trainer for the Michael Newton Institute certification training and is featured in the documentary Spirit Space, A Journey into Your Consciousness. As a holistic coach, Linda Gabriel assists her clients to connect with their highest truth. She brings to this process many skills, including intuitive energy work, Psych-K, which she'll describe what that is, educational kinesiology, EFT, craniosacral therapy, NLP, and hypnotherapy. In addition to teaching workshops, Linda offers private sessions in person or via telephone or Skype. She may be contacted through her website, and John, you'll put that up, yeah? lindagabriel.com.
Hi.
Hi, Linda. So happy to have you. We had you on our show, I think, quite a few years ago, yes?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I'm so happy to be back and to see you. But I'm not sure how I feel about all the things that Kelly described.
It's going to be intense. But I was kind of curious about families that argue and have really intense relationships while they're here. How does that work in between lives? Do they go after each other?
No, they don't.
They'll get put in their corners.
You haven't met my family. I bet you they do.
Yeah. Well, listen, sometimes there's this kind of in-between place before you go all the way into where you really remember who you are, where sometimes there's something, but most of the time no, I would say no. There's much more harmony in the in-between lives. But Kelly and I talked a little bit before we came on the air about the meaning of the word apocalypse, which I think is part of what's going on. And we described the eclipse that's coming up, and an eclipse is where something's covered, right? Mm-hmm. Apocalypse, if you look it up in the dictionary, I know there's all these thought forms attached to it, but actually the word simply means things being revealed. It's the opposite of an eclipse.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And I think that's part of the positive. Someone asked for a positive. Yes, some of the things that are being revealed are not so much fun to look at, but so important to see. So we're going to find more and more things that are revealed about, for example, racial injustice and the systemic nature of that's been revealed. That there are things in fault lines in relationships and within our own personality will be revealed. So everyone's under pressure right now, just because of COVID and what's happening in the streets and just the challenges we have getting groceries, all of these things, to wear a mask, to not wear a mask. And if you're outside, people get into arguments about that. So it's intense right now. And whenever there's intensity and stress, the stress lines become revealed, which is why I think, and then when you have the astrological stressors, then whatever's in between are these two brothers, did you say?
Sister and a brother.
Sister and a brother. That's going to come to the surface. It's going to bubble up. Be harder. That takes a lot of consciousness to navigate that and to not succumb to all the energies that are kind of whipping you around. You know? Yeah. So, but in terms of what happens, maybe I should describe Life Between Lives a little bit for people who haven't watched us talk before about this. A Life Between Lives session is something that most people know about through Michael Newton's books. He was my teacher and a really interesting guy, kind of like Brian Weiss is to Past Lives. Michael Newton is to Life Between Lives. And I recommend both of their books, especially Brian Weiss's Many Lives, Many Masters is a great introduction.
Best book.
Yes, great book. It's a small book, but my gosh, there's so much in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of gives us an interesting view into past lives, because for those of you who've read it, this isn't really a spoiler. It's one woman having many different past lives who was working. She was trying to be relieved of phobias that were beginning to
Drowning
control
phobia,
her life.
yeah.
And so Brian Weiss, who's a psychiatrist, had done all of his other work with her. It hadn't really helped. And he decided to try hypnotherapy. And much to his surprise, she went to a past life. He asked I think it was an agoraphobia. Like, she was so agoraphobic. She was hiding in the closet.
She was afraid of drowning. I think
She's
it was
afraid of drowning. She's afraid of many things. Now, here's the interesting thing. She doesn't remember what happened in those. She did not want to remember. She was devoutly Catholic, and the whole idea of past lives was too hard for her to cope with. So she asked him not to tell her what happened, which kind of flies in the face of our idea, well, if I can't know it, if I can't bring it up to my conscious awareness, then I can't heal it. But she was bringing it to her super conscious awareness in the sessions, and she was able to be freed of all these phobias by remembering what happened in a past life. And you're right, one of the phobias was the fear of drowning. And so they went to the first incident where that occurred, and it was a past life where she was standing with other people, and this tidal wave came and swept away the whole village. Yeah. So that was, and when she came to, she didn't remember anything, but her fear of drowning had disappeared. So it doesn't always happen by that way, by the way, for past life memory. We wish it did. It's about a third of the time, once people know what happened, then the symptoms disappear or improve dramatically.
Yeah. Well, and that happens kind of in therapy too sometimes. Knowing where it stems from kind of decreases the intensity of it.
Exactly.
So at the very least, it offers you a choice.
It does. And yes, and the choice can be, oh, I'm special because this thing happened, and therefore I'm going to hold on to my fear of drowning, so because it happened in a past life. So yeah, I wish I had the formula for that. We would have people lined up around the block, Shirley, if we could.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, so back to life between lives. Most people are familiar with a past life regression, or what people describe that happens in past lives. But Michael Newton found that he was able to go even further and to see what happened after the person died, and to follow the soul's journey from leaving the body to the interlife, or the spirit world, whatever you want to call it, where they are able to reconnect with their soul group, to talk to their spirit guide. There's a council of elders that people visit from time to time. There's a lot of information that we're able to recover. For many, many years, it's like people who did this kind of work wanted to go there, but they always would just go to the gray fog. And somewhere around, I guess it was the early 90s when Michael Newton started doing this work, that I think our higher selves said, these people need help. Let's give them a window into who they really are. So suddenly we were able to travel into those areas. And so the best way to think about a life between life session is something very close to what many people describe from near-death experiences. Only you don't have to go through the physical trauma of a near-death. You can, you can kind of connect with that part of you that remembers what it's like to be out of the body, and even contemplating coming into this life. So there's a piece of a life between life session where we look in utero, not to see, we did that with you, Shirley. You remember, you kind of stayed there the whole time. To find out what you were aware of as a soul before you came into this life, as you're in your current identity. That's a very fruitful place. We can learn a lot right there. So yeah. Do you want to say anything about that, Shirley? About your experience?
I have to tell you, it was an incredible experience. I don't remember the details about it. It was years, but I remember it was an incredible experience. And I was able to go under, which usually I have a hard time with that. My left brain, but yeah.
And since you mentioned that, I want to just put this out there too. A lot of people believe and have been told, in fact, I thought it too, because it's something that was written down and repeated over and over again, that in order to do past life work or life between life work, that you have to go into a really, really deep state of hypnosis. And what I found is that actually a light trance state is perfectly fine. We don't have to go into a really deep, deep state, because you were under, but you weren't really.
Yeah, I mean, you're still very much conscious and present.
Yeah.
At least I was.
You have kind of a split awareness. You're sitting in a room, but the way it is in a movie theater, when you're really engrossed in the story, you sort of forget about, you never think you're not in the theater, but that all
Right.
goes into the background and
Yeah.
the story, because
Yeah.
we become immersed in the story. It's
Yeah.
similar. That's actually a hypnotic state, by the way.
Yeah.
Most of us go in and out of hypnosis all the time. It's
Right.
not that strange. It's not that unfamiliar.
Right.
So, yeah.
Do you go, is the idea to go into a theta state?
I think an alpha to theta, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to go all the way to theta to access this.
Mm.
Here's the way I look at it. The conscious mind is like a great big searchlight. It's really, really bright, and it makes all these other like little candle lights fade out in its because it's so strong. In hypnosis, the conscious mind, we turn a dimmer down on that light so that these other sources of information become more apparent. And I think it's a little bit interesting because it's actually the subconscious mind that has the connection to your higher self and to this, all your Akashic data. And that's really what we're reading or experiencing or tapping into when we do a Life Between Lives session. That's how I feel about it. Some of that's informed by my understanding of the Hawaiian spirituality system called Huna, where they understand that it's what we call maybe the subconscious, that the word for it is unihipili. That is the part that actually talks to the Aumakua or higher self, and vice versa. That's why, you have a dream that's given to you, that's coming from your subconscious mind, but it's your higher self using your subconscious to get a message to you. Mm-hmm. We in the West are always trying to connect with our higher self from our mental self. And that's why it's so hard to get guidance, to change habits. It's like we're talking to the wrong part of ourselves. We're really a three-part being. And so you got to understand how the switchboard works. So once I figured that out, I understood, okay, that's what's happening. The Unihipili holds all of your records. It's your subconscious mind. It's in your energy field. It's what a good psychic is actually reading. That same, in fact, the word in Hawaiian is aka, is for that it's the web that connects everything. It's very similar to the Sanskrit. I don't think that's a mistake. So that aka web is understood by your intuition is also from that lower self. The sixth chakra is higher wisdom and insight, not so much that gut feeling that you have, like, don't sit next to this person. That comes from your belly. It's from a lower part of your being that understands what's safe and what isn't. So anyway, we're getting off the subject a little bit here, but yes.
So you're saying that comes from your subconscious?
Yeah, that the subconscious and your higher self or superconscious are very, very closely connected. So when you're in a hypnotic state, the subconscious comes forward and delivers the message from your higher self. So it's but the main thing is that we have to get out of the way is the part we're most identified with, which is our mental self, our conscious mind, which is what we think we are, and it's highly overrated. So, yeah.
So when you go into this state,
yeah,
is one of the things that you can work on is what your soul contract is?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting because we have these concepts about like soul contract, you almost have a feeling like there's a scroll and you've signed it, and but it's actually more, all of these things are vibrational, really. It's more subtle than that. And so people will get a feeling about what it is that they're here to do or what their connection is with someone. It's not so much like you're handed a movie script to act out. We could talk about, I know I saw something about what is the higher self. And I just want to put a disclaimer. I've been a work in progress and doing this work for the last 20 years. I redefine these things all the time. And from my perspective at this point, your higher self is that part of you that's never separated from the divine. And that is kind of almost acting like a guide, but it's actually part of you and not so separate. But because we're here in the physical body, it's easier to think of it in third person as something separate. To kind of have a conversation with our higher self, even though it's a higher dimension of your own soul. So that's what I think the higher self is.
So a higher dimension of your own soul.
Yeah. And a slightly different from a guide. A guide would be something that's not so personally connected to you, but and maybe more developed than you are. Although sometimes I think we're all at that high level, and we've just stepped down our energy so that we can have these experiences on the physical plane.
I've thought that often, actually.
Yeah. That's why I have trouble with the word evolution, because it always sounds like you need to choose to add something to yourself, or you're not okay, you know, when actually I think of it more as we're remembering who we really are rather than evolving into something that we already are. You know?
I see. Right. Because we're already that. It just gets kind of. Well, what would you say? It's not eroded, or it gets kind of shift, or we forget with the experiences that we live through, and so then we have to find it again, and that is part of our journey.
You know, there's a couple ways to look at this. I mean, one is that, you know, you come in, you get beaten up by the earth school, and you kind of forget stuff, and you get more and more like rusty or something about trying to remember, or there are people who think we're trapped here. There's all kinds of things. The two teachers there are two teachers I've had who've said some things that really helped me with this. And this is where I am right now. One of them is just the general purpose of life for everyone. This is a Native American teacher named Joseph Rael. He's also known as Beautiful Painted Arrow. And someone asked him, you know, well, so what's the purpose of life? He just said something that kind of blew everyone's mind about war and why those people were doing what their purpose was. And here we all were working for peace. And they said, well, Joseph, why is it okay for them to be doing that and us to be doing this? And he just said, you know, here's the deal. We come into this experience in order to remember who we are. And there is great beauty in the remembering. And then he added something that stuck with me forever. He says, and there is great beauty in the forgetting. So it's a little bit of a game we play with ourselves. I don't really like that word game, but I haven't found a better substitute. That we come in, this other teacher said something. He said, what the biggest, the most powerful creative act we do as a soul is to convince ourselves that we're separate and limited. And we do that to ourselves so well that when we're here, we can't remember it. It's not anything that was done to us. We've chosen in order to have these experiences on the physical plane. And the more that we get into like things like virtual reality, we may all just be playing a big virtual reality game on some level. So I think it's so fascinating that we keep on creating things in the physical world that are giving us mirrors. Like, it's not that we're like computers, it's that computers are like us. It's not that virtual reality is like virtual reality, or it's not that virtual reality is like reality. It's like, because reality is like virtual reality. And in fact, there are physicists who've been asked this question, and apparently there's no way to prove that we're not living in a simulation. So there's no way that we can get outside of this experience in order to observe it.
What would be the point of that, to live in a simulation?
Well, if you're, I mean, I've had this vision of, like, you know, adolescents playing video games in heaven.
Yeah.
This is it. But actually, I take life a lot more seriously than that. That's not what I really think is going on.
Well, wait, John, somebody just had a good question there. Can you put that back, John? Can our souls change our contract?
Yes, we can change our contracts.
Is that dependent on a reason, or?
Yes. Let's say first of all, a contract, like any contract, is only as good as the paper it's written on. In other words, the people who make the agreement need to honor the agreement. For different reasons, people may choose not to honor the agreement, or they may be so deep in their forgetting. Let's say, for example, that you have a contract with a soulmate to have a relationship, but along the way, before you met that person, they became a cocaine addict, and that wasn't part of the plan. Now, are you bound to be partnered with that person? No. And you can change your contract, and then someone else, all of this is happening below the level of our consciousness, or maybe I should say
Yeah.
above the level of our consciousness, that they're like free agents are saying, well, I'll be your soulmate for this lifetime. So just because somebody abandons that contract doesn't mean that you're going to be left high and dry. The soul is incredibly creative and can rearrange things. You know, the timing might be off a little bit, but your soul lessons and what you're here to learn and do and your soul purpose are not that easy to screw up. That's if there were two things that I've learned, and the message that the guides give over and over and over again to my clients, is that you're doing much better than you think you are. Everybody's got
message.
a much it's really and part of it too is we've kind of got it's upside down and backwards. Like, we think if we're not doing well, like financially or in relationship, and we feel like we're failing, actually making mistakes is how are the most rich experiences. Yeah, Kelly's nodding. You've probably gotten this through some of your work too.
Oh, absolutely. But it's very
And
true.
that if you
I
come
always
in
want
and have
people to know that.
Yeah, if you come in and have a perfect life with no boo-boos, like, that's boring.
No, and also, you know,
Yeah.
all of the traumas and all of the wounds and all of that is
Yeah.
really makes us the strongest that we could be. It gives
Yeah.
us our life, you know, meaning and purpose, and it shows so much about
Yeah.
us. It's how we learn.
Yeah.
We don't come
And
here not to have those experiences. Be a waste
we
of a
don't.
life.
And I think some of those are things that we have ordained for ourselves, certain things, and others are things that just happen because it's kind of, you know, it's sort of like a Christopher Guest movie. Do you guys know, like, the Spinal Tap, or Best in Show, and
Yes,
the Mind, you know, like, and the thing that's kind of interesting about Christopher Guest movies is they have a plot, sort of, but no script. They improv everything. They kind of know what's going to happen.
Wow.
Yeah, they're not written. And so that's kind of how I think it is that we have a basic framework. We have a blueprint. And then this is the theater, and we start improving. And when that happens, if you've ever done improv, things can go in a different direction.
Right. Yeah.
So, but the other analogy I've used is, like, if you were ever going to build a house on a piece of property, and maybe there's a stream over here and a big boulder over there and a mountain over there, that stream, mountain, and boulder are the big events of your life that you've already said, okay, I'm going to do those things. But then you have all this creative freedom to make what the house looks like, which direction it faces, does it have skylights, like, you know, who's going to live in it? You know, we have a lot of creative freedom there. We could even change the path of the river, but that would take a lot of energy and may not be the best use of our time. You know, we could bring a bulldozer and move the boulder. But then we probably will disappoint ourselves and think, what was I thinking? I really needed that boulder experience.
Right.
Once we're here, we're kind of, why do people go to psychics? They want to prevent anything bad ever happening again, right? And so and a good psychic will teach them how to embrace that, to embrace the so-called negative experiences in life.
Well, speaking of the different experiences that are going on in life now, what do you think with regards to the unconscious about racism, and what have you had any experience with that in life between lives?
What I'll tell you I've had is that people have been all races, all sexual preferences, and it's kind of interesting for someone who's maybe a slightly homophobic male to find that he was actually, like, the biggest relationship in his life, in a past life as a Roman soldier, was with his best friend, and it was a love relationship, a homosexual love relationship.
Wow.
Which in those days was not considered a negative thing or anything to even hide. So that gives you a different perspective. I have to tell you, I am so much less judgmental of my fellow human beings, having seen some of the scenarios. And yes, there are a lot of things I could talk about. They're politically sensitive, because if we look at them through the lens of today, then they have a whole other context. But from the soul's purpose, there are things that someone might have chosen in the past for certain reasons to learn. So it's been really interesting for me to witness things. I have permission to speak about some people's sessions from most of my clients. I'm not sure about the one I'm thinking about if I have that permission. So I'm sorry, I don't want to like talk about somebody's session without their permission. But in terms of what's happening today, the one thing I would say is this: when you have something, there's something that's happening, and I think some of it's astrological. I think that there's kind of a mass agreement for us. First of all, I think many of us chose to come in at this time.
Yeah.
To experience exactly what you're talking about, 7 planets in retrograde, or how many there, like it's like everything's going backwards, at least apparent from Earth. That kind of means that the Earth is moving forward, by the way, right? So we've got that going for us.
Challenged. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it takes a lot of energy to get a rocket into space. Like we're in that kind of rough and tumble moment as we're moving forward to another level. And sometimes some people perish in that, and some people become injured, but it's for, the whole group is moving to another level. Here's something really interesting. Someone sent me a video of a fellow reading a section of a Seth book. You know who Seth is, that Jane Roberts channeled. This was written at least 30 years ago. I have not read this book, but he wrote a book about mass consciousness or mass events and human consciousness. I can't remember the exact title of the book. And this section was about, are you ready for this? The connection between pandemics and social upheaval.
Wow.
Does that resonate with what's happening now?
Completely.
He said there's this like soul agreement, talk about changing your contracts. Like people will come together and say, this is enough. Life is intolerable. Things need to change. We're going to have a pandemic. It's like,
yeah.
And we are seeing this like together, so huge. It's not just, so getting back to what soul purpose is and what happened with George Floyd, like this has happened over and over and over again. I do not know why that particular moment, I mean, I know why it affected me so deeply, but something got galvanized, and there's still, how many days later is this? And it's not just in Minneapolis, it's all over the country. It's all over the world.
All over the world. Yeah.
It's no more.
It was a tipping point. It was a tipping point in consciousness.
Yes. And so when it almost reminds me of like when Princess Diana died, like that was another thing that kind of galvanized people, and there was kind of a pause button, and we were already in a pause button because of quarantine. And people are still motivated. I know some people think, well, it's because people are in quarantine, but I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah. Well, I have to agree with you that somehow they're related, because this has been going on. I mean, and Rodney King happened in 92, 93. Right. So how many years later is the exact same thing happening? Yeah. And nothing's changed. So,
so I don't think people were demonstrating all over the world.
No, they were not.
That's my point. That how many years later we see the exact same thing happening with police force, and and nothing's changed, and so it had to happen at such a high level. And you're saying that somehow, in what you read, a pandemic, and
because it gave
connected.
And in the pandemic, it gave people the time to go inward, whether they wanted to, or they didn't want to.
I think the thing that struck me the most with what Seth was saying is that it was actually a soul choice to have a pandemic and to even die from it.
Oh, I agree with that 100%.
I know, and I had always, I mean, if you look at history, when there have been plagues, it does change radically. The social structure changes, but I always thought that was an effect of the pandemic, that just sort of a cause and effect thing. He was saying that the social problem is why the pandemic happens, in order to make the change.
Oh, interesting.
That was what was new. Now, when you get into that, it's sort of saying that people's deaths are being chosen in order to change things. And I really believe we all have exit dates. Obviously, we don't get on this planet without that. No one gets off this planet without dying. It's part of the deal of being alive. But I don't like to blame people's illnesses or deaths on them as, oh, well, that's just your soul choice. That's just not helpful. Although there's a grain of truth in it. But it's not helpful because it's kind of like, just like if you create your own reality, then anything you're going through that's bad, that's your problem. You created it. So I don't have to react to it because that's what you created. That is not what I'm talking about here. And I think we have to be really cautious about blaming people for what's going on, right? I feel really engaged with what's going on and activated by it, even though I understand on some level well, I'm thinking about Carolyn May saying, when so many things are going on, that God's got a hand in it.
I love that.
Yeah, whatever God means to you. There are big forces at play right now, way beyond the individual.
Right.
And yet there's some kind of what I would call an elegant soul, like George Floyd, to have volunteered on some level. But even up to the moment of his last breath, there were choices to be made all along the way. This is the thing. It's like where we have to be really careful because it sounds like, oh, that was supposed to happen, right?
Oh, no, I agree with you. There were choices. Any of those men could have stopped it at any moment.
Could have.
Yeah.
And that would have taken us in another learning direction. So and we have to ask about the perpetrators, the 4 officers and what their soul agreements were to highlight this issue. I like I said, I don't have all the answers, but when you see something on this global scale, it feels like, yes, there's something. I'm looking at what somebody said. Maybe too many of souls keep repeating the same mistake. Yeah. But I just want to say something about race, that there's so many smart and insightful people are talking about just like what it's like to be living in this aquarium water that we don't even notice, that we think well, we aren't racist, or that somehow it all doesn't affect us. I'm speaking of white people in particular. But we have been under the spell of a kind of white patriarchy for many, many centuries, and that's probably shifting. We're seeing it in population demographics; it's shifting, and this is all of these things are interesting for soul experience. And don't be surprised if you don't come back as a different color, a different religion. And you get to experience it from it. Like you say, both sides now, like all sides now.
Right. But I'm glad that you're bringing that up, because it's very easy to come from my point of view as an example. I use myself to say, well, I'm not racist and I'm open and stuff, but I live in a society that started that way. And so, I realized that I was influenced by it, because my daughter, who's biracial, it didn't even occur to me when she was going to school one of my considerations should have been to find a school that had people who looked like her. It didn't even occur to me. That is systemic racism, on my end. And I never considered myself to be racist. But when you're born into a society, rules that have been made that is, you have those, for me, it was just a lack of awareness. It didn't even occur to me.
Yeah, exactly. And also, what I was going to say is that children are not racist. They have to be taught. There's a song from South Pacific, you have to be taught to hate.
Absolutely.
I had a kind of an inversion in a reverse racist racism experience living in Hawaii, where Howleys, we're called, the Caucasians are the minority. And some of the questions that there's a woman who's written a book on white fragility. Her name is, you know who she is, Robin DiAngelo, I think is her name. And she was asking all these questions that I was saying yes to. Like, have you ever been aware of the color of your skin when you walked into a room? Yes, for 20 years in Hawaii.
Right.
Absolutely, yes. What's the first? Can you remember the first school teacher you had who was a different race than you, or the same race than you? My children grew up in a school system where all the teachers were a different race than they were.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I watched my children go from all their preschool friends up through kindergarten, and then around the 5th grade, those friends wouldn't sit with them at lunch because they'd get beat up if they sat next to the haole. So, my older son went to therapy when he was in college, and his therapist was African American and was fascinated because he'd never met a Caucasian person who had racial trauma. But yeah, when you live, I could leave, and go other places where that wasn't the norm. And I had a little bit. I was married to a surgeon. He'd saved so many lives that we were embraced by the community. So I had a lot easier. But still, I think that a lot of white people have never experienced themselves as the target of racist beliefs, or to be judged just because of the color of your skin. I've had that experience, but it's not, and it's not fun. But it's nothing compared to what Black people are experiencing.
But that's an interesting question. When you walk somewhere, have you ever been, aware of the color of your skin?
Yeah.
I have to say no, I haven't, and that right there is the difference.
Yeah.
So, John, should we take a call now?
Yeah.
Take some calls.
Go to our calls. All right. So we've got our first caller calling from area code 551. Can we have your name, please, and where you're calling from?
Hi, this is Simone from Brooklyn, New York.
Hi,
Simone.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So I just had a question about if you could maybe go a little bit into what would you say about chronic illnesses that we're experiencing maybe in this life, if they at all coalesce or are a result of sickness or maybe even perhaps karma from a past life. I've been dealing with digestive disorder and gastrointestinal issues for most of my life. So I just wanted to see if there was any kind of correlation with the two.
Thanks for your question. Yes, from time to time, we do find that chronic symptoms are connected to past life trauma. I've never seen it be like karmic punishment unless the soul chose it. So I've learned, like I said, I've redefined a lot of these things. I've never ever in like thousands of these sessions run into someone who was being punished by their guides and they have to go back and experience something. What I have seen is souls choose to do this because they wanted to experience the other side of the coin. There's also something that can happen that's actually, I think of it just as a kind of like a technological problem. I don't understand how it is we bring our energetic selves into a physical body. But sometimes the trauma will leave an imprint on our energy field, and that doesn't always get cleared away in the in-between life. So when we come back in, you might have a rash on a place where you were wounded, or a birthmark, or a chronic problem, that a pain problem, or like a digestive problem because of something that happened. Sometimes when we investigate that in a past life, it can relieve those issues, but not always, just sometimes.
Yeah.
But I would just advise Simone not to feel like she's being punished, because that's not, in my experience, not the way it works.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a surgery. It was a kind of a life-threatening thing that happened to me. I was a baby. I was about 10 months old. And there's a scar on my stomach that, because I was so young, they said that scar would be so small. Like it should, but it's pretty large as I've gotten older, and so like it's just always now been there. And even though I was so young when I had that surgery,
but let me tell you something. Like I said, I was married to a surgeon, and that's exactly what happens. The scars grow along with you. They don't stay small. Actually, that's actually normal.
Okay.
Yeah. But what's behind your question is you feel like it's something larger for you now. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think it also, you know, I've always had a little bit of trouble listening to myself and
Your gut. You were going to say your gut, weren't you? Right?
I'm sorry.
You were I sounded like you were going to say I have trouble listening to my gut.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know,
So
it's always been an issue.
So that's where, you know, my teacher, Carolyn May, said that your biography becomes your biology. So what's stopping you from listening to your gut?
Right.
I'm asking you, actually.
Oh,
What gets in the way?
gosh, I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, well, you know it's a familiar problem, right? You say, I have trouble with that. I always don't listen to myself, my intuition. So who do you listen to instead?
Yeah. Well, I listen to everybody else.
Yeah. Okay. So this is an example of a symptom that's highlighting for you where you sabotage yourself.
Right.
So what would happen if you didn't listen to, or emphasize everyone else's messages and followed your own gut? What it's telling you. How would your life change?
Well, I guess ultimately that I'm just afraid of then what the result would be. You know, I'm afraid of making the wrong decision, and I'm afraid of, I guess, being wrong. You know, because I was always told my whole life that I was wrong, or that I was always taught my whole life not to trust it. So that once I then give over to that, I've never been used to doing that my whole life,
Yeah.
So then to actually then take the leap is then what is that unknown is really there's no clear North Star for me,
Yeah. Well, I think that there probably is, but when you got told at an early age that it was wrong, and surely you can jump in here anytime you want to. We're not really wanting to do therapy over the phone, but that can make it harder for you to find your North Star because you don't trust it. But I bet you it's there. Your stomach is trying to tell you what's going on. I bet it gets worse. Your symptoms increase when you're not listening to yourself.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing. Is that
also? Yeah.
Stomach issues can also point to unresolved trauma from this lifetime, and that's So I would recommend also somatic work with a therapist trained in somatic experiencing, so you can maybe explore.
I agree 100%.
Yeah,
and also it could even be the trauma of having had that surgery as an infant.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely, that's trauma that needs to be explored and cleared. I mean, certainly babies, they can experience birth trauma. They can certainly, if there's a surgery that could have, when a baby's having surgery, particularly in that area, you tense up and you freeze, and it could be that never got released, and so your whole life, your kind of bowels and viscera stayed in a kind of tight bracing state. And so as you get older, of course, you're going to find issues in that area, gastrointestinal issues. So I would highly recommend a consultation, maybe with a somatic experiencing practitioner. Maybe, John, you can put the link up again?
Yep, I just did.
Oh,
and thank you for calling in, caller. We're running out of time, so I have to move on to our next caller, but we appreciate you calling in. All right. So
good luck, Simone.
Yes, we've got, let's see, Arlene, I believe, is calling in from New York. Hi, Arlene.
Hey, I'm actually in California.
Great.
What was that?
Hi, Kelly.
Hi,
I'm in
Arlene.
California. I'm from New York.
Oh, great. Did you have a question for us?
Yeah.
We're just running out of time, hon.
Yeah, well, if it's originally going to be, if you don't, finish your soul contract with somebody here, if it changes, do you then have to or you have to come back and do it at another time? And what if it, like I said, if you're trying to do the work, like, with a child, and they don't seem to be doing the work, and you're in it to do the work, but you can't remove yourself from the situation, nor can they. What happens? And can somebody have two souls in their body, and they're a struggle between that they want to do something, but there's two different entities within the same body? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a lot to pack into the last few minutes. Yes, there have been situations where there's two souls in one body. That kind of thing has been forbidden. It's not going to be happening much more. So this is a whole metaphysical question, but it should be less of a problem. There are other, like I'm talking about two souls actually living the life out. This is a little different from an entity attachment. But for your question about people, unresolved contracts, you have other options. You can pick it up and work with it later, or you could change the contract. With children, I'm assuming it's a parent, that you're the parent. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Then you can just you can teach them, you're planting seeds. Some of those seeds may not bloom for 10 years after they're out of the house. So you do your part and allow your child to, and also affirm this. Everybody has a team. When you're how old is are your children or your child?
He's 12. He's adopted and he's 12. So there's a lot of other from his soul and his contracts seem very messy to me. Yeah.
So he's 12, and that's getting really close to the age of spiritual autonomy. About 14, he'll be much more responsible for his own actions than he is now. But it's our job to protect these kids when they're young. Then after that, they have to start making their own choices and to learn their own lessons. It's really hard. I have two sons. It's a rocky road raising sons, not always, but often.
Yeah.
And you can only do what you can do, and just ask yourself, is this in your highest good? Is this in your son's highest good? And then trust that he also has other angels and guides that will be, either he'll listen to or he won't. But but he's lucky to have you. And just acknowledge that you're here to help him, and also acknowledge that he's a soul with a lot of history, and he has what he needs. If he can just plug into it, he'll find his way.
How do you know if they do have, I really do think he has two souls in his body. He talks about himself as two different, it seems like there's two people struggling in there. And how, you said it's not going to happen much, but how do you know if it is?
You know what? I'm going to ask you to contact me go to my website and write to me, and I could talk to you about that, what might be going on with him, and we can check and see. And maybe Kelly has some insight into that too.
No, I think she should talk to you about it.
Yeah.
I think you might be onto something there.
Yeah. I have some information that I might be able to share with you, and some support.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for calling, Arlene.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Arlene. All right. Well, we are at our final few minutes, and I do want to give shout out to Linda's website. It's lindagabriel.com. And Linda, you do so much more than just life between lives regression work. And, but I want to let folks know that we will be meeting for an after chat in our Zoom chat room. So if you are part of our Both Sides Now TV community group, you can join us there, and we will have the link to go to our Zoom chat room. I'm going to put up the information on how to get involved in our group, because I know that this hour just flew by.
It really did.
We just sort of skimmed the surface of life between lives, and this is sort of, actually, it's not sort of, this is a 3-part series, really, because we began this series way back about 4 years ago, and we have 2 parts of that already on YouTube, and this is the 3rd segment, which is more about the current climate of what's going on and how life between lives can help. But you can always go to our YouTube archives and review to get more information about life between lives, and also book a session with Linda. Linda, you're back to doing sessions with Life Between Lives. Is that correct?
I'm doing sessions on Zoom for the people who are comfortable doing this kind of work on long distance. And others will, what did you say, Kelly? When will we be back to being able to be with each other, like early next year or something?
Yeah, pretty much January, February.
Yeah, I've been scheduling people for the fall, but my intuition is going to be longer than that. So, yeah. And Yeah. So yes, contact me and we'll talk if you're interested. Yeah.
All right, that sounds great. And then Cal, on
Mhm.
Thursday, we will be back and we will be on at I think 2 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to be discussing numerology and life paths, correct?
That's right.
All
Right. And I
right.
want to give a shout out to Shauna from the Crystal Shrine in
Woo,
Burbank.
that's so
That's
beautiful.
This
beautiful.
is an amethyst point. Is this the
Wow.
coolest thing ever?
That's
The
beautiful.
Crystal Shrine. And Shauna can be reached on Instagram at the Crystal Shrine. What she does, she only has a few of these left. I bought one for James, and I just think it's the coolest thing. I love this thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, and if your family acts out, kaboom.
There you go. It has dual purpose.
Yeah.
And
I
everyone's saying they hope you come back, Linda, and especially your
I
friend
would love
Celeste.
to.
So
Especially what?
your friend Celeste, who contacted you for
Celeste,
this show.
yes.
And I know this was a real hot topic that folks really wanted to discuss. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, this has been one of our most popular topics over the years. So there's
Mhm.
a lot to cover, though. There's quite a bit to
So
cover.
much. Yeah.
And so Linda will be joining us hopefully after, and we'll be getting that
Yeah.
room started in a few minutes. So folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Shirley. Appreciate you making the effort to
Bye.
connect at the office
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thanks, John.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
Linda.
John.
Everyone, you take care of yourselves. Be good and
Bye,
kind to one
everyone.
another.
You've been listening to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo Dr. Shirley and Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world.